Hello, 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 and welcome to another community call here with the Bindplane team. This time for our March edition, we have a bunch of cool things prepared for you today, everything that we've been doing for the last month or so. And of course, as always, with me today, I have Denton, and he is super hyped to get on with the demo and show you all of the new cool features that the team has worked on in the last month. And yeah, for the intro, just to make sure everybody knows, I'm Adnan. I do developer relations here at Bindplane, and Denton is our superstar sales engineer. So Denton, go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
Yeah. How's it going, everyone? Yeah, Denton, as exactly as Adnan said, sales engineer here at Bindplane, and yeah, genuinely excited to show off some of these features today. So
Yeah, we are super stoked. We just had our newsletter go out for the month with basically everything we're doing right now in a just like an email quick format, and we're gonna go through all of that more or less during the next 30 minutes or so in the community call here. And yeah, as always, you're already used to the rough agenda we're always doing, and that's very simple. We're gonna talk about what Bindplane is, what it does, what's new on the feature side, on the product side, and then of course do some demos, show you how all of those features tie into what you're doing on your end. And then of course our community shoutouts. As always, we're going to talk a bit about what the community has been up to in the last month, and of course what we will be doing moving forward in the next couple of weeks. And yeah, let's do a quick roundup and quick intro and just go over what Bindplane is as an intro here. And yeah, you probably already know, but let's just say once again, Bindplane is an OpenTelemetry native telemetry pipeline. So what does that mean? OpenTelemetry native. It means that the core functionality is to provide a unified platform to monitor and manage your telemetry data. And it means that you can use various sources and destinations, pretty much in the hundreds of different sources and destinations, which means that it makes it super easy to collect and process, but also export your telemetry data because it's built on vendor agnostic OpenTelemetry standards. So basically, we're all OpenTelemetry here. It's all based on and built on OpenTelemetry, and we're pushing that standard forward pretty strong here. And what does this mean for you as an end user? Well, it means that Bindplane makes it super easy to manage a fleet of collectors. So you can scale your telemetry infrastructure very easily to insane numbers of Kubernetes clusters, servers, etc. And then from a cost point of view, because it all boils down to cost at the end, this makes it very cost effective because you can use processors and you can set up processors to reduce the amount of telemetry or exporting by using Bindplane in the UI. And it's just super convenient to do. And of course, it's built on the OpenTelemetry collector and all of the processors that the collector supports. And then from an architectural point of view, what that would look like is very simple in this architecture overview right here, is that there are essentially three parts. The middle part is where you have the collectors, which is all of the collectors in your network. So in the you as the customer network. This is where all of the collectors live, and they're responsible for gathering telemetry and then, of course, exporting them to your observability vendors. And then the kicker is left side, which is the control plane. That's where Bindplane lives. And that's the control plane for managing our collectors and basically pushing configurations, managing what type of collector you want to have, updating them, and all of those managerial tasks, so to say. But now, how does this work on a communication level? Well, it works through the op-amp protocol, which is the new protocol that the OpenTelemetry community has been pushing for, basically communicating with collectors. And what's cool with the op-amp protocol is because at Bindplane, we have the Bindplane distro for OpenTelemetry collector, which is basically an upstream version of the OpenTelemetry collector contrib with the op-amp protocol built in. So it's actually the first collector distribution that's running op-amp built in. And that basically means that Bindplane as a control plane can super easily configure, manage, and basically do whatever you want with your collectors that are running in your network. And how this communication works is that the op-amp connection is actually established from the collector side. because it's using WebSockets. It connects with a WebSocket from the collector up to Bindplane, and then keeps that connection open. And then whatever happens, you only really need to open, sorry, you only need to open a port outwards from your customer network. So you don't really, if you have any security concerns, if you have any limitations there, you're not opening inbound ports, you're just opening outbound ports. And that's really, really convenient. And also from a security point of view, I think it's very important for you that have that concern. And yeah, with that quick rundown, I think we can go to the fun stuff and get Denton to talk a bit about all of the new things we have in Bindplane in the last month.
Yeah, sounds great. Awesome. Just getting my screens ready to share here. Yeah, I'm going to be showing these in the Bindplane platform, but just to highlight them ahead of time, we're going to be looking at some of the changes to our file log source. Perfect. Let's hop over there. So let's jump in here. So yeah, we've recently moved the parsing logic out of the file log source and into the processors, right? The processors have already been there. And let me show you what this looks like. So if we come into our add log sources and we scroll down and look, you'll now see a deprecated file source. So this is our existing source that we've always had. And for those who are familiar, we've had this option in here to parse the data as it's reading it. And you're typically either parsing it as JSON or parsing it with a regex pattern, right? You're not losing any functionality. We're just now, if we look at the file source, right, that option is no longer available. And instead, you're going to use one of our many processors for parsing that data, right? And so we've got parsing JSON as well as parsing regex. So again, functionality is still there. It's just you're going to do it in the processors. So another change that we want to call out is that we recently added multi-line support for some of our network sources. So our Syslog, our TCP, and UDP. I'll show you what that looks like. So if we come down, again, you might be already familiar with these sources. They're really commonly used, Syslog, TCP, and UDP. But now when you go in there, we'll select TCP and we'll create a new one. You'll actually see we have the option for multi-line parsing. And what that means is sort of the default expected format of the logs are going to be one log per line. So new line delimited. But that's not always the case. Depending on what's sending those logs, they can be formatted in different ways. And maybe a full line a full log takes up multiple lines. And it can actually go a little bit further, and you could get a partial log sent in one request, and then the remainder of that log in another request. And this multi-line parsing will handle both of those use cases. So you'll be able to define exactly what defines, like, what does the start of a new log look like? And you put in a regex pattern for that. So one of those situations where when you really need it, because your logs are not formatted in sort of that default one log per line way, this is really helpful. Cool. Awesome. Another source change that we've got. So we recently added the Splunk search API source. So what this is going to allow us to do is actually query your Splunk API and return data from Splunk. We've seen this be really useful in migration situations. And so, yeah, I think all of the sort of standard fields that you would expect, primarily focused on how to reach Splunk and how you're going to authenticate, and then putting in a Splunk query that's going to return certain data that we can then send along as logs in the pipeline. Awesome. Cool. Now let's get into a more sort of functional demo. And this is the one I'm especially excited by, really because I think there's probably a ton of use cases for this that we haven't even started to explore. And so that excites me. I can't wait to work with customers to understand how they're going to be able to make use of this new source. In particular, it's what's called the file stats source. And another sort of fun aspect of this is we're talking about logs often, right? We're really focused. Everybody's got a ton of logs that they need to get into some number of destinations. And we don't focus as much on metrics, but the file stats receiver is all about metrics, and specifically metrics about files on your file system. So let me show you what I mean. So if I open up this source, I am targeting a particular folder and all the files in that folder on my machine. All right, and I just happen to create a folder for this demo, and the files are called old files. But you can imagine a use case here where maybe you have some kind of pipeline in your environment where files are being written to disk, and the expectation is that those files are being consumed by some other system and then deleted once they're consumed. So the expectation is any file in that directory should be relatively new, and new is going to differ depending on your use case, but you really don't expect those files to be older than, say, a couple days old, right? Because again, they're written down and consumed and deleted. That's the sort of normal cadence. And if that's not happening and you're seeing files lingering on disk that are older than a couple days, that could definitely indicate something's going wrong with this particular processing pipeline. All right, so let's see what that would look like with this new file stats receiver. So again, I'm targeting a particular folder. Just so you know, on the back end, I've got a handful of files in there just to sort of prove out the use case. And I want to capture information about the M time or the modified time. And I'm also capturing the count, the file count. And I'll show off the size in a bit. But we can also do the access time and the change time, right? Under advanced, we've got a couple quick settings here, the collection interval, and then I'll show off the file path attribute in just a second. Cool. So really quick setup to get this source running. Let's take a look at what the data looks like coming out of it. So let me zoom in just a bit to make this a little bit easier. So like I said, I've got 4 files in this folder, but this could just as easily be hundreds or thousands of files. And each one of those files is we're going to get a metric about that file, including the file name, information about the metric itself, like what describes this metric, and then the epoch, the number of seconds since the epoch. All right, so this is in seconds, this value. Great. So we can see each one of these files has been modified at a slightly different time and day. So let's do some processing with that. And I've already built out this pipeline because we don't have a ton of time, and I want to show off what we can do a little bit more than exactly how it's done. But I'll walk through each one of these processors. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to add a new attribute to the data. Let me expand this out so you can see it. And I'm just calling it glob because technically that was a glob pattern that we used in the source to define where we're looking. So I want that to be my new sort of identifier for this pipeline, to say I'm looking in this old files directory. But you could call this whatever you want. So I added that field. And then I deleted the file name field. And I did that because I'm going, and we'll see in the next processor here, I don't particularly care about the modified time for each and every file. I care about the minimum, right? The oldest modified time, because that's the one that's telling me, yeah, there's some files lingering around, right? And this is just the use case that made sense for me. You guys could track each and every file individually if that's useful for you. But in this case, I'm going to delete this resource field so that each one of these is not sort of individually identifiable. And then finally, in this stack, I'm going to compute the minimum metric. So it's going to look at that file modified time, and it's going, instead of producing one of those every whatever interval for each file, I want to create one metric that tells me what is the minimum of that. And in this case, I'm doing that every 10 seconds, right? But this could be at a much, much slower interval. I'm doing this 10 seconds for the sake of this demo so we can actually see data, you know, shifting and moving. But maybe you pull this once every couple hours, right? Or you know, twice a day, something to that effect. So that ultimately this could generate a very small amount of data that's still really valuable in understanding how some of these files are being processed. Awesome. So we're adding this field, we're removing the file name identifier, and we're computing the minimum modified time. So we're doing that here at the sort of first part of the pipeline. So now let's come down to our next processor node. And now we can see we took those 5 metrics, right? Count plus 4 M times. And now we're producing 2 metrics every 10 seconds, basically. And again, we could do that at a much, much shorter interval. So now let's take a look at this file min time, or file M time min, right? So again, so it's again aggregating those, reporting 1 metric. But now let's make that even more useful, right? And we're going to get into some fancy OTTL or OTTL, auto custom processing here. So again, I'm not going to go through all the details, but I'll show you exactly what I did. So let me expand out. I'm going to make a little bit more room so it's easier to see. So my goal is, again, I'm a little less curious in the interested in the specific timestamp, but more interested in how old that is, how many days, right? So I'm going to take this epoch seconds, I'm converting it to a timestamp. I'm going to get the difference between the current timestamp and that timestamp, right? So that's going to give me a duration in hours. I'm going to divide that by 24, and I'm going to turn that into an int. So this whole thing is basically saying, instead of giving me this epoch timestamp in seconds, give me how many days old is that oldest file. And I'm going to turn that into the new value of this integer, right? And I'm setting that to that particular metric name. So same metric, I'm just changing the value from this epoch seconds over to the number of hours. And I'm going to go back. And lastly, I'm going to update the unit. So instead of seconds, it's reporting it as days. That part's probably not like technically required, but it makes everything look a little bit better when you get it into your downstream system. So that's a quick update. We're just setting the units to days. Awesome. So let's see what this all looks like. So we made some modifications. We got the minimum timestamp. We converted that to days. We changed the unit. And we're going to send all of that down to Grafana. And let's hop over to Grafana. And we're going to refresh this, and we can see I'm tracking the number of days old the oldest file is in that particular directory. So I was able to pull in that attribute as a label and show that in my dashboard. And I was able to show the number of days here as a simple counter that we can easily add thresholds and alerting to, right? So I've got my threshold set to anything greater than 5. It's going to turn red. If I dropped this down, I could adjust that accordingly. So again, that's one example of a way I think this new source can be really, really useful and interesting, thinking about different use cases. I'm going to show one more real quick, and that is tracking the file size. So another sort of similar kind of use case where you've got a certain file or set of files that you expect to be in a certain size range. But again, if those files are starting to grow, that again could be some kind of indication of something not working as expected. So I added another file source or file stat source, a slightly different directory. And this time I'm only collecting the file size, but I am collecting the full file path. And again, I've got it at a 30-second interval just to make it all a little more dynamic in the demo. But you could slow these collection intervals way down if you don't need to track it that sort of real time. And then in here, nice and simple, we're collecting a metric every 30 seconds. Right, it's the size of the file in bytes. We've got our file name and the full path, which is great. And I'm going to move that path up into the attributes with our copy processor, just so that's where Grafana sort of wants to find those labels, right, in the attributes. So I'm just gonna pop that guy up into the attributes, send that on to Grafana. And here we can see I'm tracking the growth of that particular file. And again, I'm able to pull that attribute in as a label, track that in our graph, and again, easily set thresholds if that makes sense. Forgive my dashboarding abilities. As I've said in other webinars and such, my expertise is in Bindplane, not Grafana in this case, but I think you get the idea.
What do you mean? I think it looks beautiful.
Thanks. It serves a purpose. So short,
which is that's the only important part here. Does it work? Sure. Yeah.
It definitely works. That much I can say. I'm going to call out a couple quick resources, show you one last update, and then turn it back over to Adnan. So you might be asking, like, how are you possibly supposed to know about all of those custom functions and converting the epoch to a timestamp and getting a duration? So all of that is within the OTTL, Open Telemetry Transform language. And there's a ton of documentation in the upstream OpenTelemetry collector contrib repo. I'm calling out the README in the OTTL functions, tons of functions that you can make use of. Bindplane is ultimately making use of a lot of these functions under the hood. Like when you're using things like the copy processor or the add field and so forth, it's using OTTL under the hood. But if any of those functions aren't out of the box, we can ultimately make use of them with the custom processor. So take a look, tons of functionality built into OTTL, and then other sort of documentation as well, showing how you can actually do math expressions in there, which we did to get the duration for the timestamp. Really cool. I know we're running out of time. Let me point out one more quick thing. This is really exciting for a lot of folks. We're shifting gears entirely. And that is we just added the Google Cloud Storage as a destination. So this is really exciting. We've always been able to get data into Google Cloud Storage through Google Cloud Logging and the log router. Now we can send it directly, right? And all the fields I think should be exactly what you would expect: bucket name, project ID, authentication, and then information about how granular or do you want to save that data, folder sort of prefixes and so forth, and then all your standard exporter destination functionality, retry on failure, queuing the data, persistent queue if there's any issues sending the data. So really excited that we added this, and I think people are going to get a lot of use out of it.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. And the file stats is pretty cool from a security point of view if you want to monitor who's accessing your admin level or sudo level file system.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's, like I said, there's tons of use cases. We've really just scratched the surface here. But I'm, again, excited to see what the community comes up with for how to utilize this. Monitoring password files, you can track permission changes, lots of really good stuff there. And again, with minimal data, right? Those metrics are small. You don't have to be monitoring on a 30-second basis like we were in the demo. So, yeah.
Yeah, like doing a daily snapshot, just looking at.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really, really cool. And yeah, and now after Denton's awesome demo, I'm going to have to do some underwhelming community shoutouts.
No,
I'm kidding.
This is all great.
No, KubeCon is a massive one. So if you're going to KubeCon, we would love to meet you there. So, and by we, I mean Andy, Dan, and myself from the Bindplane team. We're going to be hanging out at the OTTL Observatory, by the way. And if you don't know what the OTTL Observatory is, it is absolutely super cool if you're into OpenTelemetry. It's a dedicated spot on the KubeCon floor, dedicated to just OpenTelemetry. If you have any questions, if you want to know more, if you want to help contribute to the project, if you just want to learn more about it in general, just come by, join us. We're going to be walking around with big AMA OpenTelemetry written across our backs. So literally, if you have any question, you just pull our sleeve, just chat with us. We would absolutely love to meet you there. But more so than that, we're also going to obviously want to shout out Andy's presentation. He's going to be talking about OpAmp. Of course, we mentioned OpAmp at the beginning. Andy is actually the maintainer of the OpAmp project. Dan, of course, is a maintainer of the OTTL collector, but specifically the connector framework. But I think Andy's presentation here is super exciting, and we would definitely want to invite everybody to join. If you're there, if you want to join, if you want to talk to us, you can always also just drop by the observatory, and we can point you in the right direction to join Andy's presentation. And yeah, that's it for KubeCon. It's at the beginning of April now, so only 3 weeks away, 2.5 weeks away. And regarding other community shoutouts, we are doing a OTTL deep dive workshop on March 19th. So that's seven days away. Registrations are open. You can go ahead and register at this link right here. And yeah, we're really looking forward to it. It's going to be Mike, our Bindplane CEO, Mike, and myself. Mike is I'm going to say OTTL celebrity. He's one of the OGs in the OpenTelemetry community, so has a lot of knowledge to share. We're really looking forward to getting him in front of a camera and getting him to share cool stuff about OpenTelemetry. And yeah, and other things that we like to give a shout out to is our expanding partnership with Google Cloud. So we've just expanded the partnership even further with Google Cloud and with SecOps in particular. Yeah, one more thing is the Bindplane with SecOps workshop we did in February. We have a recording for that. If you didn't check it out or if you missed it, you can always go back and look at the recording on our YouTube channel. Of course, we have a bunch of new how-to guides regarding SecOps as well. So you can just jump into the docs how-to guides /Google SecOps, and you can see a bunch of new cool guides there that we've basically taken from inspiration from the workshop that Denton was so awesome in building out. Just put them in written form as well for everybody to see as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it for today. We can do a quick Q&A if we have time and if we have questions. If not, we can call it a day. Yeah, just to recap at the end, of course, don't forget the workshop next week, and do try out the file log and the file stats that Denton was just demoing. Yeah, Denton, if you don't have any more to add, I don't think we have any questions either.
Cool. Yeah, I think we're good.
Yeah, this was really cool, and thank you for the awesome demo. And until next month, I'm going to be pulling Denton's sleeve to show some more cool Bindplane updates in April. And yeah, hope to see everybody at KubeCon.
Yeah, and I'll just add, share those use cases in the public Slack, right? If you guys find some fun and interesting ways to use any of Bindplane in general, but the file stats receiver in general, share it in the public Slack, let everybody know. Excited to see what you're doing.
Yeah, of course. It's a nice call out. Yeah, we're a bit over time, so we'll cut it off here. And yeah, thank you everybody for joining. And yeah, see you next month.
Thanks, y'all.